What's going on, guys? Welcome back to my Friday Night SmackDown audio review for July 5th, 2024, here on the Saturday, the morning of Money in the Bank. I'm Graham Jesus Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well and enjoying your weekend so far. We have not been able to do a pre-show pay-per-view SmackDown review, I think since, God, I don't even know when. Because I think every show they've done this year, every pre-show pay-per-view, or every pay-per-view rather, they've done, that's been on a Saturday, which has been all of them, obviously, I've either been there for, that being the Rumble and Mania, and the other ones have all aired like early in the morning. Elimination Chamber, Backlash, not in the morning, but like the afternoon where it's too early or just pointless to do a SmackDown review at that point. But Elimination Chamber, Backlash, Clash of the Castle, King and Queen of the Ring were all Saturday afternoon shows. So I think Survivor Series might have been the last one, assuming I did a SmackDown review that weekend. That would have been the last one. That was almost 8 months ago, so that's kind of crazy. But we're back here. Not really an overly exciting SmackDown worth reviewing anyway, but if only for that final match, the final few moments of the Bloodline segment and the main event. The overall show itself was pretty throwaway, honestly, and SmackDown's been on a roll now for a few weeks. The last two SmackDowns were excellent, two of the best shows they've delivered all year in either brand, coming out of Clash of the Castle and then last week's show, Madison Square Garden, that I was there for. Two great shows. This one, not so great, but it did have some good stuff on it. Live from Toronto, the same arena that they're going to be having Money in the Bank in, the Scotiabank Arena, I believe it is. They're going to be emanating Money in the Bank from tonight and Heatwave on Sunday. I don't think Raw is going to be there. I'm pretty sure Raw on Monday is still going to be in Canada, but not in Toronto. So we'll open up the show here with the awful revolving door segment that we typically get, the revolving door promo segment that WWE has been known to do over the years. They brought it back here for the men's Money in the Bank participants. With Jey Uso, LA Knight starting out, Carmelo Hayes interrupting them, Chad Gable interrupting them, Andrade interrupting them, and then Drew McIntyre finally interrupting them. No one really getting a chance to say much. The back and forth between Knight and Uso with the yeet and the yeah, which people have been, talking about for a long time now, as far as, well, when are they going to finally go face to face and have that yeet yeah off? We kind of got a little bit of that here, and it was fun. The rest of this was complete fucking throwaway. I mean, Drew McIntyre had a couple good lines. He mentioned to Jay when he got in the ring, because he has history with a few of these people. He mentioned to Jay, how did you even get in the country anyway? And I thought that was kind of a funny line. And Jay even acknowledged that in his own promo, because he was the first one to start out here. Because for a long time, Jey Uso, due to his DUI history, could not enter Canada. And I think that changed when they went to Montreal for Elimination Chamber last year. I don't know if it was a case of it's been X amount of years, or WWE just worked to get him in. I don't know how they managed to do that, but they did, and it was a funny line. So beyond that, though, this was a pretty basic segment. I thought it might lead to a 6-man tag team match, and Teddy Long might come out. Not actually, but, we're going to get a 6-man tag team match tonight, and it would make sense, because I think were there 3 baby faces, or were there more than that? No, I think it would be 3 baby faces and 3 heels, right? They could have done. I'm glad they didn't, because it wouldn't have really accomplished anything. But they could have done Jey Uso, LA Knight, and Andrade versus Hayes, Gable, and McIntyre. 3 heels, 3 baby faces. They didn't do that. I'm glad they didn't. It would have been a waste of time. So I thought this was fine. I don't want to say pointless, because it did hype up the men's Money in the Bank ladder match. But it's like, when you format it this way, which they've done a million times before, it really does not accomplish anything. Another match that really didn't serve much of a purpose, the Street Profits versus Pretty Deadly. In a good match. It was nice for what it was. I enjoyed this for what it was. I love Pretty Deadly. I think the Street Profits are also very talented as well. Obviously, they're also a great team. 2 teams I really much enjoy. But this match was just kind of there. I mean, they set it up via a backstage segment on last week's show. They had a good match. The crowd was into the action. But again, what purpose did it really serve? It wasn't a tag team title #1 contenders match. The Profits aren't doing anything right now. Pretty Deadly aren't doing anything right now. And it's a bummer, too, specifically in the case of Pretty Deadly, because this marked their first match on the show in over 3 months. The last time they were on SmackDown was late March. The last SmackDown that I went to, right before, actually, I was at the SmackDown right before Mania as well. I was at SmackDown 2 weeks in a row, one time in Connecticut, and another time the night before WrestleMania in Philadelphia, because that was their Mania weekend. But one of the final SmackDowns that I went to before last week was back in March. It was the Good Friday edition of SmackDown. They were on that show, beating Randy Orton and Kevin Owens in tag team action. They fucking beat Owens and Orton, and they have not been on SmackDown since. At least not wrestling. So their grand follow-up to beating Orton and Owens was nothing. They were not on the show for 3 months. That, to me, does not make any sense. And you would think they might win here, considering, and maybe they did this for a reason to make people think that Theory and Waller would retain later on in the show, and that was why the Profits won, so they would be next in line. People then not remembering that the Profits already got a title shot against Waller and Theory right after the draft, and they lost. So, it was a fine win for them here, but I'm thinking if you really want to build up new challengers like Pretty Deadly, and Pretty Deadly aren't really much of a threat. They are new faces in the tag team title scene. They were only featured once about a year ago, and they feuded with Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens, actually going into Money in the Bank, and it was not on the Money in the Bank pay-per-view. It was on the SmackDown before Money in the Bank, and that was a really fun match in London. But we really haven't seen them challenge for the tag team title since. They would have been a nice, interesting addition to the tag team title scene, and they lost. And the issue with the Profits is they win their occasional match here and there. The issue with them, though, is that they don't really have a lot going on right now. They were doing their thing with the Bloodline for a few weeks. They had Angelo Dawkins in the opening round of the King of the Ring, replacing Bobby Lashley, losing to Tama Tonga. They faced the Guerrillas of Destiny about a month and a half ago, and they lost. They faced the Bloodline, I think, in a six-man with Owens, right? And they lost? Or was it a DQ win or something along those lines? And their feud with the Bloodline kind of dissipated. They were attacked backstage, and that was really about it. Now they're going in a completely different direction. And I like the Profits, but it goes back to what I mentioned a moment ago, Bobby Lashley getting hurt. We have not seen Bobby Lashley on SmackDown since right before King of the Ring, because like I said, he was supposed to be in the men's King of the Ring tournament, and then he was sidelined with some injury, and they said it happened while he was training, and maybe it did, who knows. But that was 2 months ago. We've heard no update on his status since then. We don't know where he is, what he's going on, or when he's going to be back, what he's got going on. Which is a bummer, because I think the Pride stable has potential, and they beat, for whatever the fuck it was worth, they beat Final Testament at WrestleMania, and they've just been doing nothing. B-Fab was with them here, but they're not going to really have much going on until Bobby comes back. And I'm glad they're even on the show. It would be, it's better than them just disappearing from the show altogether until Bobby comes back, which is what happened with Gallows and Anderson when AJ Styles got hurt back in late 2022 or 2023 or whenever it was. AJ disappeared off the show, so Gallows and Anderson disappeared off the show as well. That does not need to happen with the Profits, but I'm just kind of hoping they can find some direction soon and get something going for themselves in the near future. Another tag team match here, a women's tag team match. Bianca Belair and Jade Cargill taking on Candice LeRae and Indi Hartwell again. The match was decent, but like I said, again, this was the third match these two teams have had in the past month and a half. They had a match at the King and Queen of the Ring pay-per-view, I think on the pre-show for the tag team titles, and Jade and Candice won, or Jade and Bianca, I'm looking at Candice's name in the headline here. Jade and Bianca beat them on that show. They had a rematch on SmackDown soon after that either ended in a win for them or a DQ win after Alba Fire and Isla Dawn got involved. That was right before Clash of the Castle that led to the Triple Threat Tag Team title match at the pay-per-view. And they had a third match here. Third straight month, third straight win for Bianca and Jade. And again, nothing wrong with the match. Kind of served as a way to get them back on track because they lost the tag team titles at Clash of the Castle. They both failed to qualify for the women's Money in the Bank ladder match. And here they are, now back on track with a win in tag team action. So, because Candice and Indi were, specifically Indi on last week's show, was a thorn in their side in that qualifying match where she cost her opportunity to qualify, and then she also failed to qualify, but so did Jade and Bianca and whatever. So none of them qualified for Money in the Bank, but they had a match here. It was fine, and Bianca and Jade did say afterward in a post-match promo that they are on the way, on their on their path to reclaiming the WWE Women's Tag Team Championships that they lost by not being pinned back at Clash of the Castle. So that's their current mission statement. They're really going to drag out this tag team thing. I don't know if they're going to get the belts back. I could very well see that happening. To defend against who? I don't know. Because they've already beaten Damage Control. They've already beaten, Alba Fire and Isla Dawn, who gives a shit, but they've beaten Candice and Indi. Zoe and Shayna, they were about to beat before Alba Fire and Isla Dawn got involved in their match about a month ago. So I don't really see the point in putting the belts back on them. It would be fine, but then who do they lose them to? Right back to another team? They might as well attempt to reclaim the belts and then fall short. And that's where the split happens or the tension happens. And I don't think a match is happening between them at this point at SummerSlam. I think that might be too soon at this point. But around then, we can start to get the first signs of dissension. I don't think they wait until WrestleMania. I don't know if they can to have their first one-on-one match. That's not for a very long time. There's not much of a women's tag team division to withstand them remaining a team until January, until the split happens in the Rumble or whatever. They're probably going to have to start the signs of dissension and tension and whatnot in the coming weeks/months. SummerSlam might be too soon, but WrestleMania feels too late. We then had the undisputed WWE Champion Cody Rhodes coming out alongside Randy Orton and Kevin Owens to briefly address the Bloodline. Now, the promos themselves, specifically from Cody and Randy, were nothing to write home about. They just quickly addressed beating the Bloodline on Saturday, and Randy's promo was blink and you missed it. He might have spoke maybe for 30 seconds. He might have said 2 things. So I honestly forgot after the segment was even over, after the segment even ended, I forgot if he even talked or not. I know Cody did. Randy I forgot about. The main takeaway from the segment, the main, kind of crux of the segment here, was Kevin Owens' promo addressing his own family, actually. And he did tie it back into the 6-man tag team match at the pay-per-view coming up tonight against the Bloodline. And we did find out, by the way, via the graphic, if it wasn't already clear, seemingly it's going to be Solo Sikoa, Tama Tonga, and not Tonga Loa, but rather Jacob Fatu in the 6-man tag team match tomorrow night, which is great to see. Tonga Loa would have been fine, but, the Gorillas of Destiny and whatnot. But I think Jacob Fatu being in there is very exciting. Making his in-ring debut against 3 top-tier talents on pay-per-view, that's pretty fucking cool. Tama Tonga, same thing, actually. I think he had his first match, right? At Backlash against Randy Orton and Kevin Owens back in May in France, and they won that match, actually. Anyway, so Kevin Owens' promo here was really about the Bloodline, sure, but it was more so about the status of his family. Because they're in Canada, which I totally forgot. He was obviously from Canada. He is from Canada, no shit. But his family will not be ringside, specifically his mom and dad, and they typically are, for the Montreal shows and the Toronto shows and stuff like that. Because his mom was hospitalized a couple of months ago. A couple of days ago, rather, and he's been in the hospital with her ever since. So she was hospitalized. He went up to his home in Montreal, Quebec. I forgot where his family is from. I think it's Montreal. And he's been with her in the hospital ever since. So that was really unfortunate. I don't know if he said what had happened, but it was obviously serious enough to keep her hospitalized for 5 or 6 days. And she's not going to be there tonight, as a result. So here's wishing her a speedy recovery and hope all ends up being well. We had Bayley in action up next, a non-title matchup in a Clash of the Castle rematch with Piper Niven. Fine match here. The Clash of the Castle match was better. I would say that match had more crowd heat, and it did. But if you remember when we talked about the match here on the channel a few weeks ago, and I wrote about the match and whatnot, I had said even the crowd for that match wasn't overly hot or anything compared to everything else on that show. Mostly because Piper Niven, yes, is from Scotland, but no one actually believed she would win the belt on that show. They had a very good match, but Piper Niven, the crowd being behind her, they weren't as behind her as you think they would be. They were into her, but not as much as you think they would be in her home country. We were not in her home country here. This crowd did not really care about Piper Niven, didn't really care about the match. And the match itself wasn't really anything worth writing home about anyway. It was a good match, but the focus was on nothing really going on in the ring, but rather around ringside. They had the women's Money in the Bank participants. Io Sky was shown standing ringside, or in the crowd, whatever, at the barricade, by the barricade. Tiffany Stratton walked down at one point. Naomi was in the corner of Bayley. Chelsea Green, who's also in the women's ladder match, was in the corner of Piper. So it was all about them, everyone kind of showing up. Lyra Valkyria was there. Zoe Stark, I think, showed up at one point, I think. But yeah, that's really what this was about. Bayley won. That was it. They are teasing tension, not tension, but really heavily sending the message, heavily implying that Naomi might win the women's Money in the Bank ladder match tonight. I don't think she does. I think it's Tiffany. But there is a decent chance Tiffany, or rather Naomi, wins and, goes on to not cash. Oh, yeah, cash in on Bayley. I don't know about necessarily turning heel is what I meant to say. But she could cash in on Bayley, whether by surprise or via an announced cash in, whatever. But they're really trying to send the message that she's going to win tonight. And I don't think she does, but, can't completely discount that possibility. But that's really what this was all about. Then we get to the main event. Now, right before the main event, which was the tag team title match, obviously, not right before, but a little bit earlier on, they aired a video package, actually, for the tag team titles, playing up the importance of the belts, showing past champions. In Triple H, this is a Triple H specialty, and he has been doing this really since he took over. Because I remember one of the first few SmackDowns that he was completely in creative control for was that Gunther Nakamura main event for the Intercontinental Championship. And they played up throughout the show the importance of the Intercontinental title. Now, this was right after Gunther had won it. In June, he had been champion for like 2 months. It was one of his first defenses. And they really wanted to make sure people got the message that the belt is indeed important, and it really set the tone for the rest of his run as Intercontinental Champion, that being Gunther. So they did something similar here with the video package, playing up the importance of the tag team titles, like I said, which really helped a lot, because the tag team title is one of my biggest complaints, still, of the Triple H, Paul Levesque era of WWE Creative, is that the tag team divisions on both brands still feel neglected. And I like Awesome Truth. They had a couple different defenses, obviously. It's not like they never defended and they were never on Raw, but they were never a focal point, never had any feuds post-WrestleMania, and they lost the belt right back to Judgment Day, which I liked, just because it ended Awesome Truth's run, but it's not as if they had any teams waiting in the wings, ready to take the titles off of Awesome Truth, and they were ready for a run, being built up in the background. No. I mean, there are an abundance of teams now, which is great to see across the brands on Raw and SmackDown specifically. Not so much NXT. Even NXT, their tag team division remains their Achilles heel currently. But they need to do a better job of building up more teams. Now, we have gotten this story on SmackDown with DIY, Theory, and Waller, which is nice, A-Town Down Under. But we still need more teams being built up. The Profits have not been built up. They're obviously established at this point, but they have not been built up in a while. Pretty Deadly was not on the show until recently. Legado has no wins right now. Over on Raw, Truth is just a comedy tag team, Awesome Truth. Judgment Day isn't even really much of a team. It's Balor and Jade McDonough, which is nice. They have history together as partners, and they go a long way back and whatnot. But, that's just really a placeholder thing for them. It furthered the Judgment Day story. It really wasn't about the tag team titles. This story, there is a subtle story also being told with Grayson Waller and Austin Theory teasing tension, but it also was about the tag team titles for DIY. They had won those belts, not these belts specifically, but the NXT Tag Team Championships in that same building 8 years ago. Where does the time go? We all feel old just hearing that, if you were watching that match 8 years ago. But they won the NXT Tag Team titles against the Revival, and they weren't going to say that, in that same building 8 years ago, with the exact same finish that they won here with, actually, which was really cool, the double submissions. And I thought they might play, pay homage to it, but not exactly have them win. But they did, actually. They actually did win the belts. And not only that, it was also the same building where Johnny Gargano had returned to WWE in about 2 years ago on Raw, when he just randomly showed up and got a good reaction after being gone for about 9 months. That was also in this same building. So they played all of that up, in addition to the tension with Waller and Theory. And again, I thought they might win here to set up a rematch for SummerSlam, and maybe it would be like a 2 out of 3 falls match, and you have Gargano and Ciampa win there, and they finally become tag team champions. In Cleveland, which is where Gargano is from. I'm hoping they still make that show and they're still on the SummerSlam card. They won the belts here, and honestly, it probably worked out for the better, because if they had won the belts on that show, the crowd might be mildly behind Gargano, but even though it is his home town, home state, whatever, I don't know if they're going to be super into that match in the mid-card of SummerSlam. Honestly, I think that what they did here might have been better, where it took the main event spot. It wasn't what closed the show. The Bloodline video package was. But it was what closed the show. They played it up as important. Didn't get a ton of time, but for the time it was given, it was fun. It was a really good match. The crowd was into it. They got a great reaction. I don't know if you would get that same reaction if they were to win the belts in the stadium at SummerSlam. So I'm hoping they still have a rematch on that show, because they had a couple minutes to close the show with here, and I totally forgot about the Bloodline thing. I thought it might actually be the show closing segment would be Theory turning on Waller. That might just happen next week or sometime the next couple of weeks. But honestly, I would save that for SummerSlam. I would just do the rematch with DIY at SummerSlam, and then Theory turns on Waller on that show. So that's what I would do. But I thought this was a really fun match again for the time given. They worked well together. And not only did they have the double submission spot, where they won the tag team titles 8 years ago in that same building and then won again here, they also hit a shatter machine that Corey Graves enthusiastically called a shatter machine, which I guess is what the name of the move is. And I think that's what FTR still call it too. I know they called it the Big Rig for a while to pay homage to Brody Lee. I think they went back to calling it the Shatter Machine. I don't remember. But they hit that move here, which is the same move that FTR used in that match 8 years ago to lose. I mean, they didn't win with that move because they didn't win that match. They may have won one of the falls, though. I think that was a 2 out of 3 falls match, obviously. And that was an excellent match, one of the best matches in NXT history. And this was not one of the best matches in SmackDown history, but it was a really fun match and a great moment to close the show. DIY, for as long as they've been together now on the main roster, about a year now, they have never won the tag team titles. They have challenged for the tag team titles on a couple different occasions and have always lost, including back in January to Judgment Day on Raw. They lost to WrestleMania. They lost to Awesome Truth on Raw coming out of WrestleMania. They finally won here. So well-deserved. Hopefully they get a decent run with the belts, but they got to build up tag teams for them to face, otherwise this reign will not be for nothing. Like, it's nice they got their moment. DIY could not go further on the main roster without ever winning the tag team titles. That would have been just completely ridiculous. So at least they have this moment. But now the key is in the follow-up and doing more with them as a team and not just focusing on teams breaking up, like, the Bloodline. I mean, I assume they might actually drop the belts to the Bloodline at some point. I could totally see that, but hopefully they have a chance to have a decent run before then is my hope. So we then get to the main event, or that was the main event, I'm sorry, what am I talking about? But the final segment, rather, with the Bloodline, Solo Sikoa addressing what happened last week, exiling Paul Heyman from the group, which they did show a replay of earlier on in the show. This was very brief, but he basically just said he has his sights set on the WWE Championship, which basically confirms that the Bloodline is winning tomorrow night, or rather tonight. I'm thinking it's still Friday, winning tonight at Money in the Bank. To set up Solo and Cody Rhodes for the pay-per-view, which makes complete sense. But what he also said here in this promo was that Roman Reigns, he took his title of Tribal Chief, and if he wants it and wants the WWE title, he can come back and get it. So again, kind of luring Roman Reigns to return, maybe planting the seeds for a Roman Reigns appearance on Saturday night. I don't think so. I don't think we see Roman tonight at the pay-per-view, but it's possible they planted that seed here with that little line about, could you see yourself coming back and becoming Tribal Chief again, blah, blah, blah. I think he will. I think Roman Reigns is obviously on his way back either tonight or at SummerSlam. I don't think he comes back tonight, though, because if they're setting up Cody and Solo for SummerSlam, then where would Roman fit into that? Unless we don't get Cody and Solo, which I'd be honestly perfectly okay with, but they already planted that seed. So unless we're getting Roman and Solo at SummerSlam, which it doesn't look like we are, then they're probably better off holding off on Roman until closer to SummerSlam, if not at SummerSlam itself. And I think it would probably be at SummerSlam itself, in my personal opinion. Cody and Solo closes the show. Cody wins. Roman Reigns comes out. Or he comes out mid-match, costs Solo the win just by distracting him, whatever. And then you set forward on the path towards Solo and Roman, with Roman Reigns being back in the fold. That's what I would do. But we'll find out tonight whether Roman Reigns appears or not. I think it's actually more likely we see Jimmy Uso come back tonight in an attempt to cost the Bloodline the win. But again, I think if the Bloodline is winning, if they're winning that match, you probably don't get a return. You probably don't get anyone interfering on to cost them the match, because they're going to win. I think. I mean, that's my prediction. Maybe they swerve us. But that's what I see going down tonight. So this was a fine SmackDown. I thought it was made worthwhile for the main event alone, the Bloodline segment, and that was really about it. The promos from the babyfaces were really nothing special aside from what Owens said about his mother. Again, here's wishing her a speedy recovery. But the rest of the show, Bayley and Piper, the opening segment, the women's tag match, even Profits and Pretty Deadly, were all very throwaway. This is a very throwaway go-home show. Did not make me any more excited, honestly, for the pay-per-view than I already was tonight, but it was a solid go-home show that they thankfully closed out on a high note with the tag team title win, the tag team title change, and the Bloodline vignette that saw Solo Sikoa put Roman Reigns on notice. Thank you guys for checking out my review of the show. I appreciate it. The July 5th, 2024 edition of SmackDown. We should be back next Saturday with another SmackDown audio review for the post-Money in the Bank edition of SmackDown. We'll see what happens, what goes down on that show, what happens at Money in the Bank tonight, and how it affects SmackDown for next week. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. Have an awesome one, folks. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.